Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 144, recording on Wednesday, January 28th. Got a guest for you today. His name is Gregg Rosenthal. He is the host of NFL Daily, has a bunch of podcasts associated with the NFL. One that I've been listening to a ton recently, and I mentioned this to Gregg late in the podcast, with Daniel Jeremiah, who covers the draft for NFL.com, and it's phenomenal. Gregg's very aware of everything going on across the league, studies all of it, and has for some time. Just think he's really, really good at his job and entertaining to listen to, and has studied and watches the film, So have wanted to have him on for some time. Think the current state of the Vikings with where they are at, specifically from a quarterback conversation standpoint, would have been interesting. So had him on. Very fun conversation, and I think you guys will enjoy it. This show, which we do 2 times a week, every week, is on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you get your podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeart or wherever, you can rate, review, and follow us, and we appreciate that stuff as well. The show is presented by First Resource Bank. That is a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area, run by really good people. And Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, and Charlie Anderson. Cannot thank them enough for their support over the course of this podcast being a thing for 144 episodes. So please go check out First Resource. Their information and information on how to set up an account is in the description. The show is also sponsored by Unreal, the locally owned clothing brand that I am outfitted with and wearing almost on a daily basis. And it's just really great stuff. They've got a Miracle collection, I believe, coming out next week. That should be pretty exceptional. So I am looking forward to seeing what they have in store. And the information there is in the description. They had like a Minnesota Wild drop at Grand Casino the other night, and I've been watching the Wild, so I saw it and I wanted that hoodie, and I didn't get my hands on it, and I'm frustrated, but that's part of it. We will be back next week answering some more questions. We'll see what kind of staff updates exist. Durante Jones, the Vikings defensive pass game coordinator and defensive backs coach, took the DC job at Washington. Kind of teased that on the earlier week's episode of the podcast, but happy for him. Really good coach, really good dude, had a lot of respect internally. So very cool to see Durante get that opportunity. And I will be very interested to watch how he does there with that defense and that team as a whole. With that, let's hop right into our conversation with Gregg Rosenthal. All right, Gregg, thanks for hopping on the Alec Lewis Show. I appreciate you spending the time. Said it before we started recording. I know there's a lot going on in the football world that does not relate specifically right now to the Minnesota Vikings, but thought it would be a fun conversation. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, and I think Vikings fans are correct. Actually, everything in the NFL is all about the Vikings. They are the most important team.
I think Vikings fans, it's been a tough time to watch Sam Darnold do what he did last weekend was certainly something that I want to get into. But before we go there, I do want to ask, because you look at this stuff from very much an all 32 league-wide perspective so often, and I've, myself, I try to think about things just broadly. Are there, but among the 4 teams that have played in these conference championships, are there themes among these teams that you've thought about that you feel like you will think about or apply to how you view teams into 26 and maybe beyond?
Well, certainly it's been a defensive year relatively. And I know you watched the NFC Championship and didn't feel that way, but over the course of the season, those are 2 of the 6 or 7 best defenses in the league. And then, the Seahawks and the Patriots specifically were among the league leaders in free agency spending last year, which I find interesting. The Patriots, a great example. I mean, they spent $100 million more than any other team, and they hit on so many guys, which is is a tough needle to thread. I'm the guy who does the free agency lists, and there's a lot more misses than hits. But if you target guys that you know and you can find them in the right spot, you really can change things. And then one thing I've been thinking about with all these head coaching hires is just you really do often get your best success within the first few years of the coach being there. And that was true for 3 of the 4 teams here. Sean Payton in his 3rd year, Vrabel in his 1st, and McDonald in his 2nd. And when you look at the history of the NFL, like coach-quarterback combinations, who wins a championship, it's almost always pretty early that you can actually tell whether a partnership is going to work. And if it doesn't at the highest of levels, it's very rare that it does work at the end long term.
Yeah, it's interesting. The free agency aspect, I mean, I've watched Milton Williams do what he's done for the New England Patriots, and I know the Vikings were very much in that market and conversation. And he's a fascinating player to me because he had such a great run with the Eagles in the Super Bowl the year prior, and then, it feels like it could go one way or another when those guys sign big-time free agent contracts of, now they got paid. Was it a contract year, or are they able to generate 6 quick pressures in a conference championship? Like, he's a fascinating figure to me, at least within all of it, especially, from a Vikings lens as well.
Yeah, and it's a reminder, too, that you can get lucky because they wanted to spend their money on Ronnie Stanley and Chris Godwin, and they struck out, the Patriots, that is. And when they did strike out, they went over the top on the Panthers, who were believed to have a deal with Milton Williams, and just like, we got to spend our money somewhere. This guy's great. I think he is unique in that defensive tackles specifically, I think, develop more slowly. And it's a rare thing for the Eagles, who had a lot of other contract priorities last offseason and not a lot of money to spend. Actually, probably wish they had that one back and signed him a little early. But he did not really peak until the end of his contract year, as you point out. I mean, in the playoffs, I thought he was the best player literally on their team, or on their defense at least, and it was the best defense in the league. But he kind of peaked at a time where they ended up losing him. It's pretty rare. I do this list every year. It's pretty rare that you find a lineman near the top of the list, near the peak of their powers that hit like that. So that's pretty rare.
Yeah, I mean, and for him to be at that age and that development arc, it feels like an anomaly. And I think the point you mentioned, too, about, like, sometimes getting lucky, specifically with free agency, it does feel like that can happen. And obviously people here a couple years ago observed what it was like when the Vikings landed Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel and Blake Cashman all together in one offseason. Had the Vikings been able to sign Christian Wilkins, who knows if they end up with those 3 guys all together. So it's like the dominoes and how they fall is interesting. But I ask you that question because, and I'm glad, maybe I took it to Milton or we you did as well. But I think the interior defensive linemen, to see all 4 of these teams and who they have in those spots, part of me has just found it interesting of maybe in this area of where things are at, like to be able to push vertically on the quarterback is more important, is as important. And I kind of was curious what you thought of that. But that's like the one thing that I can identify of something that makes sense among all 4 of those teams. And maybe that's just cherry picking in some way.
No, that's a good call because it gives so much flexibility in terms of what you can do in terms of your coverage. And I think the thing that does unify all 4 teams is, like, their defensive tackles are great in short yardage situations as run stoppers, and they're pushing the pocket. So, it hadn't occurred to me, too, because I've been saying all year I thought Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy are the best duo in the league. But if you look at the numbers just as a pass rush tandem, it's the Patriots, like, in terms of their pressure. And then it's hard to go against Kobe Turner and Fisk and what they're doing. Like, it is an insane group, and the Broncos have all the sacks. So I don't think it's particularly new, but getting pressure with 4 is like the ultimate solve for basically everything that you need.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. To segue a little bit to Sam Darnold, what have you thought of this year for him, and specifically what he's done or what he did last weekend on that stage against the Rams?
Yeah, this is a well-timed conversation because I just watched that film back, and it was even better than I thought. Yeah. And I thought he was under more pressure than I realized watching it live. Like, there were some snaps where it was pristine, but there were more than I remembered where really it was his pocket movement and his ability to get through his reads fast. So I don't know who gets the credit for that. He obviously gets the most credit, but between Shanahan and O'Connell and now in Kubiak, he is a transformed player. I was always down on him compared to consensus, and I was right for a long time, and now I'm horrifically wrong. And yet, the second half of the season, really week 9 on, it was pretty up and down. He was kind of a passenger. What's really impressive is him to play, I think, is probably his best game of the season in that game of all games, and that'll be remembered forever in Seattle.
Yeah, one of the things you said that even stood out to me watching it live is, like, it did feel like he was getting through his reads and seeing it really well. And I think that was often my question with him of, like, okay, when the defensive line is stunting and they're disguising on the back end, like, mentally from a processing perspective, can he get to a certain place with how he's performing? And I mean, in that game, it was kind of undeniable. It's like, all right, if he's playing this fast and this efficient, I mean, I can understand how you would perform the way he did. But it's been fascinating, really, from a developmental perspective.
It is, because there's like 3 or 4 throws in that game where he gets to the backside of his read. There's one that's like looks like the 4th or 5th read, and he does that so fast. And that in pocket movement are kind of the two things that I love the most out of quarterbacks. And the thing that I thought maybe held him back the most, where he was the number 3 overall pick in the draft, but he never really showed that in college or as a pro, and he's showing it. And I'm sure. Vikings fans and Jonathan Grenard apparently aren't too thrilled if you saw his eyes emojis tweet.
Grenard, he hit the emojis. I mean, it was Christian Darrisaw posting an Instagram story that was like a picture of Darnold that said "Ben him." Like, there's definitely
teammates love him universally. I don't know what your experience was, but I know that is true with the Jets and certainly in Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he's not, I don't know, for a quarterback, like, he carries himself in a way that is, I mean, it's cliche, but it's like just one of the guys. I mean, he would be in the locker room on a Friday, like, eating the barbecue that they have for all the players, like, on the couch with everybody else. And sometimes it just feels like that position with the spotlight on him, like, there is somewhat of a dissonance between, like, just being part of the team. But you saw it when they beat the Packers. I believe it was after that game in 2024, and the entire locker room showered him with water bottles. Like, right. You could see then what they thought of him, and then the final 2 games and the way it played out. I mean, I do want to ask you, and I've been thinking about it a lot. You can imagine of, like, is there a lesson with how the Vikings approached it? If there is, what is the lesson? I mean, I posited, like, maybe it's, you just don't turn to the young quarterback too early. Maybe it's don't let the end of something drown out the entire experience. Maybe it's, more credit should be owed to guys who are talented and what they do in a certain system. Like, do you view it as any lesson, or maybe it's just like this is an anomaly in how it's played out?
He has almost a one-of-one development arc, and I did not blame them for how they handled it. I think they obviously have way more information and know what it was like working with him every single day and everything that he showed. But I do think those 2 games really changed, his future, because I got to imagine if he had played, even if they had lost those games, but he had played close to the level of where he was at, it would be different. What the lesson was for me, or the thing that I think is fair to look back on, is their evaluation of McCarthy. And to me, the way they approached everything between Daniel Jones, who they were willing to give some money to, and Darnold, expressed to me a real confidence in J.J. McCarthy. And, whether that gets better or not, that didn't work out for them with a pretty ready-made roster, obviously, this year.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much over the course of the season you watched J.J. McCarthy film.
I watched every game. I watch every game. Maybe the last couple. I think I watched them all.
What stood out to you watching it? I mean, I've talked, the listeners here are probably like, we've heard you talk enough about every throw and citing specific throws, but what did you think watching him?
Nothing too unique. How sped up he was early, how uncomfortable he was early, and I was kind of buying into that late in the season. He was showing real progress, but he just couldn't stay on the field, and even within that real progress in the last game or two, like there were still moments where you'd see, quote unquote, that old JJ from early in the season pop out. So I guess the overarching thing is just that he was a young quarterback that was a little earlier in his development than they needed to be. I mean, that's a nice way to put it. But I think it was obvious. I think he showed enough that, like, I wasn't crossing him off. I think when he came back, that end stretch, despite the injuries, was really important to just show something, some proof of concept late in the season.
Yeah, I mean, it for me, both in the moment, whether it was like the Sunday night game against the Cowboys in Dallas or in Arlington, the Commanders game, the difficulty in the evaluation is, like, I just mentioned the Cowboys and the Commanders, and there was also the Giants defense. So
yep.
the evaluation is confounded by, at least it was for me, I can only speak for myself, by the level of competition faced, and so it leads you obviously to the point where we're at that feels very murky, frankly.
But he does the tough stuff. That's the tricky part. It's not completely different than Darnold earlier in his career, which is and why I think players who know ball better have believed in him too, is like you can see the skill. Yeah. Like, J.J. McCarthy hit a lot of difficult throws. And to me, I don't really think about the opponent when it comes to that. Now, maybe that's where he's seeing things clearly and they're not confusing him as much. But he did do a lot of the tough stuff, and he's clearly athletic enough. So, like, you got to see a little bit of that. But mentally, it did not seem like he was that close.
Yeah. No, but you're right, though. I mean, there were certain...
And that was what Darnold was like in New York, too, I believe. Like, because there were moments, but there weren't enough of them.
No question. And there were, I mean, to your point, there's corner routes, in tight windows. There's evading the pocket and feeling pressure and throwing over the top. I mean, I'm sure you know this and you spotted it on film. The questions have been, obviously, the availability, which we'll talk about for a second, but also, I mean, the layering of the football. I think that's the one area that I would be lying if I said before going through the quarterback education that I did this season, listening to Kevin O'Connell on a week-to-week basis, like, I don't know how much I would have looked at layering or thought about it, but with how much they throw over the middle of the field, getting the ball up and down is something they really value. And I think it's an existential question in some ways of, like, or maybe not that serious, but is that something that can be developed, or is that kind of who you are? And it's a fascinating conversation to listen to and talk to people about.
And it's something that you heard even going back to training camp with you guys. The Vikings are one of the most well-covered teams. I enjoy tracking it. So, like, if he's throwing those missiles 10 yards over Justin Jefferson's head in those intermediate routes in training camp, we were hearing about it, that was kind of a problem then, and it stuck being a problem.
Yeah. To get to the present, I mean, evaluating him with like you just talked about it, and thinking about, I mean, your understanding of who the free agent quarterback options are going to be. What do you think they should do? What would you do? I know it's a fascinating discussion point here.
I know, because Daniel Jones is, in theory, also another one that got away. He is available this offseason. It's hard to imagine the Colts aren't going to bring him back. They're I think, going to make progress towards that and not let him hit the open market. Because you kept Flores, because of the veterans on the roster, I'm all for, like, if you love Malik Willis and you think that it could happen, I'm cool with that. Like, if you want to give up a mid-round pick because Kevin O'Connell thinks Tanner McKee is a dude, or you want to give Kyler Murray a chance, I don't think that's that crazy, because I've always operated that you should keep trying to get quarterbacks and, give them a shot until you're sure that you have one. Now, usually that's more of like drafting a guy in the middle rounds even. But with this team, and I'm not the one dealing with the human emotions of it all, of how that would be for J.J. McCarthy. I think you got to consider it pretty strongly of like examining all those options. Now, you might strike out, and none of them might make sense. If Kevin O'Connell doesn't love him, then forget about it. But I think you got to look for other options to compete with JJ.
It's funny, you named a few guys, and I wrote down for this podcast, I'm like, how does this sound to you? Mac Jones, Kyler Murray, Geno Smith, Tanner McKee was the guy I wrote down, Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, it's funny because those who have listened to this podcast and read the reporting probably over the last few weeks are like, stop throwing, these names they're not enjoyable to listen to, but it's just kind of the nature of where this team is. Truthfully.
It could be worse. I've seen worse QB lists in the offseason. Tua's another one. Would you ever trade for a Spencer Rattler? Probably not. Kirk Cousins is obviously not that crazy of a thought. I want to trust Kevin O'Connell, to sort of pick the right guy to come in with him. But how the JJ thing has gone is shaking it just a little bit, because there was that moment where you guys all spent a week saying, "Oh, we're going to simplify the offense. We're going to strip it down," and then it looked much better, and everyone was like, "Well, that was good." And I was thinking, well, maybe you should have done that to begin with. It seemed like they put too much on him, and so each one of those guys kind of presents different challenges, and probably would be at different, parts of a pecking order. Like Geno Smith would kind of be all right, we'll use him if we need to, but JJ's going to have a real chance to win this job. Whereas like a Kyler Murray or even a Malik Willis, I think you would bring in as the presumptive starter.
And I think one of the variables within the calculus is you have a GM and a head coach entering their fifth seasons not having won a playoff game. And so for them in particular as well, can you roll the dice on a fifth season on J.J. McCarthy, who showed the flashes that he showed? I think that's another aspect. People here locally have, and a lot of the fans who listen to the show are like, J.J.'s still young. He needs the developmental time, and that's 100% accurate. It's just the dynamics of, do the people in charge of making these decisions often or always have that time? I think it's a dynamic that I find it interesting, and it's probably I find it interesting. The people internally find it probably very challenging, is what I would say.
It's a great point, and I think it's an advantage for these quarterbacks that were in college longer, even a Cam Ward, but obviously a Bo Nix and that come out older. I know it's worked. If you're one of them dudes, like capital D, like Drake May, like that's the exception that can prove the rule. But like you can see it with him too. He's going through development in real time, and everyone's like, well, the Browns didn't do right by Baker, or the Jets didn't do right by Darnold. But like, can you really wait around? Because I think they needed that time to turn into the quarterbacks that they are. And if JJ's more of that level of quarterback, which to me it seems like that's a good scenario, like a best case scenario, I don't think you can wait around. I think with this defense, I think they got to be happy that they kept Flores. Like, they got to do whatever they can to win.
Yeah. It is. You hear that a lot of like, well, look, the Jets moved on from Darnold, and look at them now. I'm like, yeah, well, it took 5-7 years to get to that place, and if your job is on the line or what have you, you can't wait that long. Is there anything else with this Vikings team that is obviously the talk of the NFL, as we established from the beginning? Is there anything that's intriguing to you or interesting or components of it that maybe aren't talked enough about? You mentioned Brian Flores, who I've spoken at length about his defense. I don't know, what else do you find interesting?
Yeah, that defense, the fact that they kept him, I think changes my whole conception of their season. Because to me, if he had moved on and you hadn't kept one of his assistants, anything like that, to me, they're in a different place. But the fact that they're there, I think they can compete in what's a brutally tough division. The thing with the Vikings that strikes me the most is that they're so over the cap. And I know you can play around with that. But like Harrison Smith, Ryan Kelly, I'm looking at my notes for when we went through all the teams, like Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, Brian, like is O'Neal definitely back? Like it's a team that's in a difficult spot compared to a lot of others in terms of the types of decisions that they're going to have to make. They are kind of in their like we should be winning playoff games, to your point, window in terms of how they manage the cap, and they can play around with that a lot. I don't think it's that restrictive, but they do have a lot of tough, like kind of turning the roster over type of decisions to make this offseason.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, even playing around with it, that's sometimes bargain. You know, you're snatching from the future in certain capacities. But I think all of those guys you mentioned, Brian O'Neal, final year of his contract, is there an extension there? Are you restructuring certain guys, pushing money back? Is Aaron Jones at running back? What's the situation there? I mean, you could go on and on with it, and it's pretty interesting circumstance. But
if you put them in another division, you know, I would feel so much differently about them. Like I took them as one of my top picks. We do an over/under draft where we pick the preseason over/unders, which they somehow eventually got to, which is crazy, because I think it was 8.5. They did win 9 games,
right on the number, of course.
Right, but if they were in a more forgiving division, I would feel differently about them. But because they're in this division and it's like this veteran defense, like you got to find someone to try to match these other quarterbacks in this division, because until then it does feel like by default they're kind of fourth. It's like they're all close, but they feel like the other three are more trustworthy because of the QB coach combo.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's. It's going to be, at least, I mean, I say this sometimes when I have national, I'm like, it's going to be interesting, it's going to be fascinating. I'm like, maybe they're like, I don't know, like, you're just in it every day, so you think it's going to be interesting, but genuinely, with where they are and what they have to navigate, it does feel like a different challenge across the league, really.
Yeah, I do think they're one of the more fascinating teams in the league because of that, because they are straddling this weird line of, like, you could see them being in a conference championship game next year with the right moves. It's really not that crazy considering the talent and the coaching that they have, but they have like a lot of work to get to. They are a boom or bust type of team, and O'Connell has done a great job really preventing them ever being a bust. So that would be unprecedented. The fact that they got to 9 wins was impressive. But because of that, because they are a fascinating team for me to watch and see who they keep and don't keep this offseason.
Do you have a Super Bowl pick, or way too early for that?
I mean, I have a philosophy. I grew up in Massachusetts, so I grew up a Patriots fan. So I don't pick against the team I'm going to be rooting for, because what's the point? I'm going to root for
that would
my
not be
picks
fun.
in general. There's no point. Do I believe it in my heart that they're the better team? No. I mean, it's going to have to be. I mean, they're clearly not. I've thought the Seahawks and the Rams. It's my opinion that's aged the best in a season that hasn't much. Like back in early October, I was like, these are the best 2 teams in the NFL. I'm pretty sure. I think they played that way all year. So they're going to have to get like a unique game plan. They're going to need to spook Darnold a little bit. I'm holding on to this thought about Darnold that I got while watching the game, that like he did play the Rams 3 times. Maybe that's why he's getting to his 4th read. At a certain point, he was incredibly comfortable with what they were throwing at him. And the Patriots, maybe they can cloudy up that picture and make and play his best game. They got a shot, but they're definitely the underdogs.
It's gonna be fascinating. I mean, you said it in Drake May's development in real time. Like, if you master this challenge, I don't know, it would be quite impressive. The Seahawks. It's interesting. To me, the talent level on that defense, just in terms of the explosiveness and the athleticism, blows me away. And I don't know. It's been fun to watch, but I respect that. I respect the hometown feel that is makes sense. Well,
Own
Greg,
your biases. What's the point? My pick is not going to impact whether they win or lose anyway, so I might as well enjoy it.
It's absolutely correct. Greg, appreciate you hopping on. Thanks for doing it. We'll do it again at some point, but obviously incredibly respect the work you do. And yeah, I've been listening to the podcast you do with Daniel Jeremiah recently. Been on that one recently. I've enjoyed that. But I mean, we've had Ollie Connolly and people you talk to. My colleague Jordan Rodriguez, who is the best. So thanks for hopping on, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Alec. Big fan of your work. I'll see you.
And that'll do it for episode 144 of the Alec Lewis Show. Thanks to Gregg, the host of NFL Daily, for hopping on. It was really, really enjoyable to catch up with him and talk through some things related to this team and the league in general. So really enjoyed that. Hope you guys did as well. The show is presented by First Resource Bank, sponsored by Unreal, locally owned clothing brand. And we're everywhere you get your podcast, just like every other podcast that tends to say these things. On YouTube, you can hit the subscribe button. On Spotify, Apple, iHeart, you can rate, follow, all of that good stuff. We will be back next week for more episodes of the Alec Lewis Show. And we're less than a month away from the Combine, where we will be in Indianapolis talking to people, coaches, executives, agents, marketing folks, anybody and everybody related to the NFL world. We will be there at the Combine, have some shows from there, so I'm looking forward to that. And in the meantime, got some stuff at The Athletic that you guys can keep your eyes peeled for, stories in the weeks to come. I think early next week, we're going to have my 10-step offseason plan for the Vikings, which is always a fun exercise for the offseason. So stay tuned and keep your eyes peeled for that. With that, have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the weekend, and we will talk to you very, very soon.